Very good. Good morning. My name is Barry Anderson. I'm an associate justice on the Minnesota Supreme Court. Had the privilege of being a coach. I've seen your side of the table a couple of decades ago, and since that time, I've had the privilege of participating in this program as a judge. And I'm delighted to be here to hear your question today, your testimony today. Professor Chambers.
Hello, folks. This is Hank Chambers from University of Richmond. It's good to see you all. And I've been at this for a long time, and I apologize for the technical issues, but it's great to see you, and I'm looking forward to the hearing.
I'm Ann Zinkin. I am a career law clerk at the New Hampshire Supreme Court, and this is my first time judging finals, but I've been judging at the state level for somewhere between 5 and 10 years. I can't really remember.
Very good. If you'd be so kind as to introduce your team and your coaches and assistants, if any.
Hi, I'm Olivia Stan. I'm a junior at Boonsboro High School. After graduation, I plan on attending a 4-year university and majoring in marine biology.
Hello, I'm Sarah Gann. I'm a senior at Boonsboro High School. After high school, I plan to attend Hood College in Maryland to major in psychology and double minor in sociology and criminology.
Hi, my name is James Haney. I'm a senior at Boonsboro High School, and after high school, I plan to join the Marine Corps, and this is my teacher, Miss Fassig.
Good morning.
Very good. We're delighted to be here. So I suppose we should turn to the question of the day, and that question that we're going to be asking you to address for us is from Unit 4. How are the values and principles embodied in the Constitution shaped American institutions and practices? And the question that we're going to be addressing is question 1. It would be inconsistent with the constitutional separation of the executive and legislative powers to let the prerogative, pardon power, be exercised by the latter. What were the framers' reasons for giving the president the pardon power, and do you agree or disagree with them? According to the framer, James Wilson, if the president abuses the pardon power, he can be impeached and prosecuted. Do you agree with Wilson? Why or why not? In your opinion, what constitutes high crimes and misdemeanors? That's the question of the day, and we are delighted to be hearing your testimony. You may begin when ready.
The framers' decision of giving the president the pardon power preemptively countered 2 catastrophic flaws that would have come about if the power was given to the legislative branch.
By granting the head of the executive branch this power, the framers avoided the conflict of multiple people having a final say on whether or not a pardon is granted or avoided by giving the legislative branch a power that they cannot enforce.
We agree that the framers were correct in their reasoning for granting the president the pardon power.
Article 2, Section 2, Clause 1 of the U.S. Constitution states, the president shall have power to grant reprieves and pardons for offenses committed against the United States.
Establishing this as a power under the executive branch's authority, specifically the president.
If it was given to the legislative branch, the congressmen who represent a wide variety of opinions and needs would be hard-pressed to agree in order to utilize the pardon power.
Hamilton in Federalist 74 goes on to support the decision by citing that the expediency of vesting the power of pardoning the president has been only contested in relation to the crime of treason.
By keeping the power and enforcement of pardoning in one branch, it prevents red tape from interfering in the action of pardoning.
Hypothetically, if Congress was granted the pardon power, regardless of Congress's decision on whether or not a pardon is granted, if the executive branch refuses to enforce the decision of pardoning, then the legislative branch has no power to enforce its own decision.
The situation would be similar to the decision of Marbury v. Madison, where the judicial branch declared that it was unconstitutional for it to enforce its own decisions.
Marshall affirmed that the courts hold no power of enforcement. By declaring its own power unconstitutional, it prevented the branch from discrediting its own influence.
Similarly, by not granting the legislative branch the pardon power, the legitimacy of the legislative branch is preserved.
We agree with James Wilson in his statement that the president should be impeached and prosecuted if abusing the pardon power.
The power can be easily abused by the executive office.
Rather than attempting to implement the pardon power for personal benefit, it should be used to tamper threatening issues against the U.S. Likewise, one question remains on the aspect of the pardon power. Can the president pardon himself?
If so, what are the limits to this power?
Considering this, it is given that any form of abuse of the pardon power can threaten participatory democracy and at the time of abuse needs to be addressed.
Furthermore, situations that deal with perjury, tax evasion, or bribery can be used on grounds of impeaching and prosecuting a president.
Article 2, Section 4 of the Constitution states, the president, vice president, and all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office on impeachment for conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors.
The concept of impeachment and standard of high crimes and misdemeanors originally comes from the English parliamentary practice.
The House of Commons impeached and tried before the House of Lords for both private citizens and government officers, but not the Crown itself, for these were offenses considered considered beyond the reach of common law criminal courts.
This was used by Parliament to corral the power of the Crown and police political offenses committed by ministers and favorites of the king.
Essentially, the impeachment power applied to any conduct that damaged the state or subverted the government.
The term high crimes misdemeanors does not require any stringent or difficult criteria for determining guilt.
The phrase was historically used to cover a broad range of crimes.
The process of impeaching someone in the House of Representatives and convicting someone in the Senate is difficult.
This prevents officials from being unjustly removed from power due to reasons that are not explicit enough.
Former President Bill Clinton was impeached by the House of Representatives on 2 charges of perjury and obstruction of justice.
We believe that Andrew Johnson's violation of the Tenure of Office Act and Nixon's Watergate scandal fall under the term of high crimes and misdemeanors.
Benjamin Franklin stated that the power of impeachment and removal was necessary for times when the executive rendered himself obnoxious, and the Constitution should provide for regular punishment of the executive when his conduct should deserve it.
The precedent of high crimes or misdemeanors does not prove to be a crime so much as drawing the line on the abuse of power.
Thank you for listening to our testimony. We are now ready for your questions.
So I'm going to begin, and thank you for your testimony. You make a strong case for why the president's pardon power is important. And if it is important, in addition to impeachment and removal, which you identify as a possible way of limiting president's pardon power, should we limit the president's pardon power in some other way?
I think the public plays an important role in actually limiting the pardon power, especially when you get a lot of political feedback over a potentially controversial pardon. Also, we have had investigations in the past that in regards to pardons, especially it's easily proven that there is an abuse of power when especially bribery in this situation would be applicable, especially with Clinton. I know he had several pardons with potential bribery schemes behind them, and investigations were coming out about the Rich pardon even into 2016. So I think the implementing investigation in that is important as well.
I think identifying when it's necessary to use the pardon power is the best way to help limit the abuse of power. For example, in modern day times, we saw with the 45th president that he granted 237 pardons throughout his entire office time. However, 84 of 94 of these said pardons were actually on personal benefit, political affairs, and/or familiar benefit as well. So I think presidential and the executive uses executive privilege in ways to abuse that power, and they can use it in ways of, they have lines of reasoning to say what they want to do and how they want to do it, and they can say it's under their constitutional authority as stated in Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution.
Professor Chambers, the floor is yours.
So I'm curious in terms of lines of pardons, in terms of whether folks should be able to pardon family members, even if we're not going to engage in self-pardons.
My belief that is the president's constitutional right. There is nothing currently in legislation that says that they cannot pardon family members. I mean, Clinton did it for his brother who had cocaine and intent to distribute. But then you have Trump, who was discussing pardoning his family and his close friends. And so I think morally it's an abuse of power, but constitutionally and legally it's allowed.
I think in the public eye, you can definitely see issues where the public will say this isn't a necessary pardon. However, I believe that is also up to the president who he wants to pardon. If there is nothing stating explicitly in the Constitution or no moral compass to say this person cannot be granted a pardon, then the president himself will believe that he has every ability to grant that pardon to whomever it is given to.
Okay. Do you think that the president should be able to pardon for violations of state criminal law?
According to the jurisdiction of the pardon power, it is only for federal, I believe. But I think that when you get into state, there's always a possibility of an appeal, and then I think it should go to federal jurisdiction, and then it can be questioned. But currently, no, because there needs to be a limit, and this federal block of state versus federal government allows for the president's power to be tampered.
Thank you.
Ms. Zinkin, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm wondering, why do you think the framers did not put more limits on the pardon power, given how concerned they were about having a monarchy in the United States of America? So why didn't they limit the president's power more?
I think there's definitely an issue with the question of, are they going to have another favorites of the king being pardoned? And I think there's not more of a limit to it, because in Federalist 74, it was discussed that it's the intention of the pardon power. Part of it was whenever you have rebellion leaders, if there was a revolution, whether peaceful or more violent than that, it still allows for the pardon of those leaders in order to restore peace as quickly as possible. And that's why there needs to be that gray area, so that that can be accomplished while still being legal.
The pardon
Yeah.
power, go ahead, James.
I think they left it as such a gray area, like high crimes and misdemeanors for impeachment, because they couldn't foresee everything that would be needed in the future, and they were leaving that open for room of interpretation.
The power is seen as an act of forgiveness, but at the same time, I think the framers also try to acknowledge the fact that partisan politics in the future would play a role. And I think we see that a lot in the pardon power in today's society. We see a lot of partisan politics, and we see a lot of party polarization. And that can even go down to the fact that the legislative branch was not granted this power due to the fact of so many wide variety of opinions, as we stated. So many differences that one decisive decision granting this power to the executive branch would hold best.
Let me talk a little bit about the impeachment issue. Why do you think the founders chose to exclude the judiciary from the impeachment process? With the exception of that the Chief Justice, presides at the Senate trial, the judiciary is they're out of the picture altogether. Was that a good idea? Why did they do it?
I think it's it's a little bit difficult because people who are elected to seats are a little more biased, but that's also, it draws the line between criminal trials and impeachment trials, because they are separate, even though you can have some overlap, but they are two different processes. Whereas in a criminal trial, you have the right to a jury of your peers who are supposed to be unbiased, but in such a political trial, you're not going to have that opportunity. It's your job on the line and your office on the line, not necessarily your life or your fate.
Congress also does the investigations as well. So with them collecting evidence, with them subpoenaing information from anything that they need to, it would hold best to keep the impeachment power with the legislative branch, considering it is seen to be the most effective, minus the issues that we see today with the polarization, the bias, and the divide.
Great. So I'm curious, why only a majority in order to impeach in the House, but 2/3 to actually convict in the Senate?
I think it's because of the importance and the effect that it has. You can impeach a president, but it doesn't mean that they're going to be removed from office, and it doesn't mean that they're actually going to be convicted. It just means that these are the official terms. We find that you can go on to the Senate now to figure out if it's actually important enough or to warrant for further investigation or conviction or consequences for your actions.
Yeah, I would
Go
say
ahead.
I would say the reason for the bar being raised higher when it gets to Senate is because when Congress impeaches, it's just to send it further on in the process. Whereas if the Senate convicts of impeachment, then that office holder will be out of office and barred from running again. So I think that the burden of proof in that manner is raised for that reason.
Okay. Is a mere majority in the House too low to allow impeachment?
I personally do not believe so, because it's only sending that further. There's, as we explained in the last question, there's that difference in convincing people for a reason. This is just the next step.
Well, I'm going to thank you for your presentation this morning. Our time has expired. It was really a great way to kick off a Saturday morning, to have an opportunity to talk about the president's pardon power and the impeachment process. I thought you did a great job in responding to our questions, and the question that I asked you specifically about whether or not or why the judiciary was excluded, I think your answer that that really has to do with it's not a criminal proceeding in the way in which the judiciary might normally have been involved, even though it makes references to high crimes and misdemeanors, is I think dead spot on. I think the founders had a vision of something more than just simply some sort of technical violation of a criminal code passed by the legislature. You also could have gone in the direction there of the fact that the judiciary was not seen as a particularly powerful institution in comparison to, after all, Article 1, Congress, and Article 2, the executive branch. And it may not have been something that they saw as particularly feasible. But in the time you had, I thought it was a great response, and I'm delighted to be part of your day today. Professor Chambers?
Absolutely. I think a very, very strong job noting the distinctions between pardon and impeachment. Arguably, the question tried to lead you down a strange path, but you all picked it up in the right fashion, and drawing a distinction between abuse of power and actual criminal law is really, really good stuff. It's a tough question. Right, it's a tough question, and asking why we do certain things and providing a common or current day argument for why things were done in the past it can be tough. So I think it's a really, really nice job, and I'm really happy to see you all today.
And the floor is yours.
Oh, sure. So I just agree with everything that everybody has already said. I thought that you demonstrated excellent understanding of these constitutional questions. I was really impressed with your breadth of knowledge, and I appreciated the thoughtfulness that you demonstrated in your answers, and loved that you were able to sort of, in a moment's notice, sort of just pull up, Federalist number 74 and modern day examples, et cetera. So I thought you did a fabulous job, and I really